unity will come about. You have at a very base level because there's necessary human needs that need to be met in the area of food, clothing, and shelter. Um, and many things in the universe and in today's society are very nuanced, right? So there are things that we can see, and there are things in the periphery that we have not contemplated and taken into consideration as it relates to everything you discussed, right? So I agree with you overall. What exists is in this world today is kind of a tower of Babel of a hodgepodge of things, and the root of a lot of the confusion comes about as a result of language. Um, and in two veins. One is the language of the authors of what we call the Abrahamic religions. They spoke three different languages, right? And we know that in interpretation of language, there are so many nuances from one language to the other. It is extremely difficult to translate from the original language to English, which we are speaking today. And the other part is as far as our humanity as Black people, specifically Afro descendants in the Western Hemisphere, where we lost our language and now we have these languages of English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese thrust upon us, which are in this larger scheme of time are very new languages, and we're still interpreting these languages ourselves in real time today. So that speaks to the loss of language, which is a crime against humanity in itself. The next point is, and in that point, there is that's why we feel a lot of things as people, and we're not able to articulate it appropriately because we just feel a certain way, and then we express it based on the best of our ability, based on the knowledge of the language. But most of us are not able to articulate our feelings. We're not able to put our feelings into words. So, what that ultimately does is we express it the best way that we can, but that can vary from one person to another, even within the same race, right? Or even among Afro descendants, because we haven't really fully achieved the articulation of what we're feeling inside of ourselves. And specifically, and even in my own personal challenges, being able to articulate. That's something that's ongoing, and I'm better than I was 20 years ago, and I'm sure I'll be better tomorrow than I am today. Um, we must be able to find the correct understanding as it relates to religion. So in all cases, religion, and here's my articulation of religion, right? Religion are the subsequent institutions that followed the people that wrote. So in this case, Moses, Abraham, and Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, right? So they had writings, they articulated and expressed teaching. But subsequent to that, and in some cases centuries later, the institutions formed around that. So the institutions of Islam, Christianity, the church, and the synagogue, as we know it, those things developed as institutions uh, after, and again, even after the death of those men that actually wrote that. And then subsequent to the institutions forming, now we are centuries later, cultures have evolved. So in today's time, we have considerably lost the original interpretation because we're just going through the motions, right? You have people that are about to celebrate Christmas, and Jesus is not at the forefront of that, nor is the teachings of Jesus at the forefront of that, because the culture is just there. Where, all right, we know we're supposed to go through these exercises as part of this religion that was that institutions developed out of, but now it's just kind of a culture, right? So no one can really quote the Bible, no one can really quote the Quran, no one can really quote Torah, because we're just going through the motion of culture. So most people merely believe, because belief is saying, well, Randy, I'm telling you that 1 plus 1 is 2, right? And you're like, oh, that makes sense. I believe that. But you don't know until you put one thing and then you put another thing and then you say, oh, there's two. So that brings about knowledge. Knowledge in itself is belief is something that you have reason to be true, but knowledge is something that you've actually touched, you've experienced, you've gone through, and you can speak with expert opinion, not opinion, expert knowledge, or make an expert statement that this is true because I've gone through it. So, for example, I went to the pyramids in Egypt, the tour in Giza, in Egypt, and the tour guide was a Christian Presbyterian Egyptian woman, and I said, "Ma'am," and I knew I already knew the answer based on my belief, so I said, "Ma'am, were these pyramids constructed by the Hebrew slaves?" And this, as a Christian woman who's supposed to believe in Moses and the children of Israel going through the sojourn in Egypt land, and she's supposed to believe that there were Hebrew slaves there. So I said, "Ma'am, did the Hebrew slaves build these pyramids?" She said, "No. The Egyptians have no record of Hebrews ever being enslaved in Egypt land." So at that point, my knowledge was strengthened because I'm actually there, and but it's something that I believed before, but it's something that I can actually say with a surety that this is what it is, right? But of course, I can do further research to get deeper knowledge to be able to articulate it. The thing that an overall thing I'm saying is that the common ground between every person. You know in Jamaica very well, those guys that are rolling their spliff with grabba and everything, they're not gonna be able to listen to you when you start talking about black holes and stuff like that. You start talking about food, clothes, and shelter, they can get with that all day. Right? Jobs, food, clothes, and shelter. The base things that a Christian, a Muslim, Hebrew Israelite, Rastafarian, anyone can come together. We should be able to be in the same room and have those discussions and fully execute, regardless to what people believe or regardless to what people know. That's the very basic thing that we should be able to come together on, because when we start getting into these conversations, and to be very frank, when you start mentioning other people's religion, right, and you don't have any real knowledge of what the interpretation of that religion, unless you sat here and told me that you read, well, in my case, right, so you're telling me about my religion, unless you read Muhammad and then the Honorable Elijah Muhammad specifically, and then even drill it down to the Honorable Silas Muhammad, and I ask you a few questions like you don't know, so how can you speak on my religion? I can't speak on anyone else's religion, but we should be able to agree on food, clothes, and shelter, right? Those are the things that drive self-determination, because whether or not we believe in a certain thing, we still have to go to our enemies for food, clothes, and shelter. So you can teach what you teach. I can teach Allah all day long, right? But if that doesn't feed them, that doesn't clothe them, that doesn't shelter them, it's meaningless. Here in Africa, there are parts, Borana land, that's a land north of Kenya. And these are largely Muslim areas. Christian missionaries can go into that place, drill them a well, bring them food. Those people will convert to Christianity overnight because these Christians have come in and fed them. They can forsake generations of Islam just to be fed, and now they're Christians. You understand what I'm saying? So all of the understandings and the beliefs and the knowledge are meaningless until you are able to feed, clothe, and shelter yourself. You can believe that the sky is black and the earth is flat if you can feed yourself, you can clothe yourself, you can shelter yourself. Because when we get into the details of the knowledge, the consciousness and the awareness collectively of Black people worldwide is just not there yet. because we are so hooked into this system that we depend on everything for. So most people, the mentality is Jesus is Lord because Jesus feeds, clothes, and shelter me through white people. That's it. And that's why we accepted, we kept that religion after, even after slavery. And we buried ourselves, we bathed ourselves, we soaked ourselves in it. Because at the end of the day, all of it is meaningless until our daily bread can be met with that. And that's all I can say on that. But in these black conscious spaces, we have to be very careful, right? And to speak very frankly, especially, and this is a very taboo topic, especially as a Muslim that has been in many of these spaces, right? And had to endure 1,000 offenses because I know in the vein of yes, Dr. Clark, Chancellor Williams, I had to endure because I know black nationalists thinking when it comes to Islam, and I'm like, it's more nuanced than that. We don't care. It says Islam, right? So you just got to deal with it, right? Arabs did this too, and I can't deny. I live in the coast of Kenya, right? There are slave castles here where Arabs took millions of Kenyans into the Middle East. I bear witness to that. So can we agree on food, clothing, and shelter, and leave everything else behind? Because the guy rolling the spliff on the corner, the guy chilling with his
Well,
friends on the corner, the woman that has children,
here's
huh?
where that's a challenge. The rich man has food, clothing, shelter, and is not balanced. My proposal for change and balance being the not food, clothing, shelter. Those who can provide food, clothing, and shelter for themselves also provide an imbalance. Here's a sect over here that has to believe in something that's universal to still have no pedophilia, no bombs and missiles to destroy another location. The layers I'm working on here and recording this is a top layer where the other layers of mankind, this is why we have to disseminate. We understand man lives on his layers of believing and reading and practicing what he feels to be complete. On a higher frequency, which we're writing a new manual for mankind above Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, which is more universal. Because the man who has food, clothing, shelter, the wealthy man, is doing wrongs. The people in Jamaica with the mansions and so we've seen that if man doesn't have a universal consciousness that's in harmony, let's say, with a tree, if he doesn't have a truth, if he doesn't have a universal belief system that's in balance, that has so he doesn't have food, clothes, and shelter, and rape, kill. Even the Christians, in their truth and their teacher, make the error. What we're saying with change and balance, being that it's the perfect truth, for to challenge man within himself for every action he makes, regardless of his food, clothes, and shelter. So now, even a man that is quote unquote suffering can endure in the balance even of his mind and measure his level of suffering or his needs or his lack of. You see, to write something new to govern all of these imbalanced systems is what our challenge is as ancient spirits. We have to come up with new manuals because the current manuals that we have are not working. The collision is happening. So if everybody on the planet get food, food and shelter, there will still be rape. So their consciousness has to be risen to the point where they are in sync. The judgment has to be activated within them, the God energy, the truth, which is,
just for clarity,
yeah.
I don't want to. I'm not saying food, clothes, and shelter is the actual. the whole story, right?
Mhm.
I say in order to have people depart with any semblance of independence, right? That you have to start with that because what comes first is they accommodate these very basic human needs, and then the indoctrination comes in, right? That's why I use the example of the Barana people. Okay, let me build a well. There's a dry area. Let's make sure the food is sustainable. Now come and listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? We're saying that the people are not going to depart from anything they understand today until the basic human needs are met. Then you move on to the clearer understanding of things, right? And everything you said, I can find similarities to in all religions, right? So the basic thing that you just said in terms of you're using and that's a very biblical and New Testament thing, right? You get the rich man, right? Lazarus didn't get up from the rich man's gate until he did for himself. So the concept of food, clothes, and shelter is not just being met for itself. We're talking about the self determination in that as a people. I'm talking within the scope of Black people. That's what Garvey talked about. That's what Booker T. Washington talked about. That's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad talked about. It was no religion. It was very basic, clear understanding that these humans need certain things on a basic level. And until then, their minds are still going to be in the camp of the enemy because the enemy supplies that for them. That's the very beginning. And then anything else can be poured into them. So I just want to clear that up that I'm not talking about that being the end all be all, right? Yeah, rape is a bad thing, right? Chauvinism is a bad thing. But when you truly understand Islam in itself, that no, yeah, Islam includes the woman. The woman is very involved with it. Now, when you talk about Arab culture, that's something that existed in that. So you have to be very clear in distinguishing what the teachings are versus what the culture has become, right? So that involves a very base level understanding of the history of it as well, not just the doctrine and what you see today, right? You have to really understand that, right? And you can't even say that something is above that to a person that believes that until you know the differences
So here's
between the
what I'm
two.
saying to you.
Does that make sense?
Here's what I'm saying to you. As teachers from top down, I do not speak to, I speak to 1,000 who are going to write the new manuals for mankind, the new books. I'm not speaking to mankind. The reason we have books is because we've had teachers to write those books. Moving forward in the future, these books are going to be revised and rewritten because they're going to be challenged. The true nature of them being universal truth are going to be challenged because they are doctrines that are going to change. And because these doctrines are going to change, Christianity and Islam, and they're all going to change into something that is more satisfying and more inclusive on a universal level, which means it also contains the butterfly. It also reference to inanimate objects. What I'm saying to you, mankind will have new manuals, right? And it's not a purpose to let's fix all mankind. So now, when the new teaching starts to be documented and the challenge for the existing documents, and this is what's going to happen when something has failed mankind, man himself always finds better or he makes changes or corrections. Just like when Islam started with those great teachers, or Christianity, or all the previous religions. And this is just the gradual movement of life. And this is why I'm proposing new ideas to think on a universal level and to teach on a universal level to be inclusive to all religion that currently exists, but to if the Quran remains what it is today, the program and the Bible remains what it is. If all these books remain for the next X amount of years, we will have the same programming and we will receive the same results. So we're in a problem here. We're in a cycle here, a loop of programming that's not working for mankind. And it's causing a conflict among trivial thinkers. Remember, even in the Star Trekian concept or just the evolution of man going to space, we have to evolve in consciousness and have documents that challenge our thinking and fuse us, let's say, with water, ants, inanimate, try to bring it all together. You see? So, what I'm proposing and what I'm saying is that we're at a point where the new thinkers are the ones who are going to help to move us forward, are the ones who are willing to, let's say, make revisions to, let's say, certain things in the Quran or the Bible. That's not, those are the changes that needs to be made for the coexistence to be better. And still one can be Islam, Muslim, and still one can be Christian. But at least know changes were made to make that happen. And changes has to be made because if the program remains the same, we will have the same results. The agree to disagree is causing too
I, I
much killing.
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you on that. I don't have. I'm just talking more of the logistics, right?
Yeah,
So one thing that are we have to put our thinkers in place with they belong in a box, right?
yeah.
Where and then you have to compartmentalize the entire logistics system of how we'll change as a people, right? We can't give too much credence to the thinkers because the thinkers are the thinkers. Like there, then you have generals, then you have other things, right? So everything has its place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking in terms of the logistics and where our people are right now and how you get this new information to them, right? So even a teacher cannot connect with someone. Even Jesus had to feed the people, right? And then he taught them. There was nothing. We're not listening to anything you got to say until my lights get cut on. Does that make sense?
Well, here's what. Again, Jesus or whoever had disciples first.
No, and that's a yes or no question.
But yeah,
We know our people,
yeah.
with all due respect.
So I understand what you're saying,
Is-
but what I'm saying is that I'm not thinking about the people. We're on the thinkers level. We're building a thinking camp. Because when I go on TransAtlantic with the BrotherRonn show, I'm calling for judgment on all documents. I'm calling for judgment because we're going to show evidence and what Seneta has been doing and what all the collective brothers and sisters been doing is research to show. And you see, and the reason why it's necessary to call for judgment is because we're at a point, even with information. Every man who is satisfied with his personal belief system, that that has to change a little bit to be in frequency with another man's belief system. We got to start finding more middle ground. The Hebrew Israelites, everybody fighting for their gang leader and what they read because they have the ability to read and understand, but not a different language. They still haven't read Medju Necha and other sacred language. So they still don't really believe in what they believe in because that information is going to change and their sons and daughter belief will change too. So the the intelligence of our people at this stage, that intelligence, what I'm saying is, we like when I think about this, I'm in the mountains in Jamaica and I'm with people like you, and others like you and me will join this discussion. And this discussion has to be had because we're in the same generation. Love the fact that you're Muslim. Me and you have a great connection and synergy. And I'd be the first to say, I don't know much about Islam, and I would never say I do. I'm more of a earthy, butterfly, nature boy. Okay. And for me, my,
And on that point, we connect because that's what I am too,
yes, there you
right?
go. Yeah.
My hands have been in the soil, red soil, black soil, brown soil, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so as that, and that's what I'm talking. Those types of things are the things we have to connect. Now, last point, and I'll say we just agree to disagree, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
leave that
Mm-hmm.
topic because it's very this what you must understand also. This is very serious for people, right? And having gone through this, and you know this very well as well, right? People are grounded in what they're grounded in,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with our people. And if it's coming from another one of us, we've become very resistant, very combative, you only tend to make enemies, right?
Yeah.
When you start, it's going to take a level of finesse, serious finesse.
It's funny.
You understand what I'm saying?
I was listening
Yeah, go
to,
ahead.
there's a white man, it's Thomas Jefferson. I watched a reenactment of him, and he said, I'm a sect to myself, and he only speaks with people who can reason because he knows the serious nature of it. And and the hardest thing in life, and you know what? And let me tell you something, my brother. If me and you connect with nature, and all of us really kind of do. This is why I'm talking about change and balance, being truthful,
Hmm.
because that's what nature is. So now we have a language for nature, which is change and balance. When these men accept that at the seaside as the only truth, they start to apply it within themselves. So every time they had a thought about smoking, they say, you know what, that's not balance. So what I gave them was a simple equation that every time they made a move, this is why they quit. Now, all this time they've been saying Selassie and Rastafari, but they were drinking, right? So when I came and I taught
Hmm.
them that change and balance is the only truth, they quit drinking. And many people quit drinking and smoking because I taught them that use this within yourself and it will work. There's suicidal women that comes to me and I teach them, and they proclaim change and balance to be the only truth because in their suicidal tendencies, they're using it within themselves because that's what they are. So they have to work on constantly changing their mind, location, in order to keep balancing, right? So when I gave this message to the Rastaman, and one became a fisherman, he'd been to jail 10 times. I showed him the religious doctrine information. So these men in Jamaica, Jesus couldn't save them. He'd been to jail 10 times. I come to him and we sat and I taught them. And I waited a while. Now he's a fisherman. And that one quit smoking because being it that it's the only truth for them now, they're like, everything in their life, they're questioning the Ma'atian concept. And I'm sure in Islam, there's something similar to that where you question your every move, right? But the challenge for these gunmen, they're not going to read the Quran. They're not going to read the Bible. They're not going to get the message that they're supposed to build their consciousness. So, what we did in looking at the butterfly's truth is to adapt that to them And hence, they're now in a pleasant frequency. The bad men in the young youths in Manchester, you see, I tested this among people that didn't even have food and shelter. These men sleep outside, and sometimes the sea's rough. And I didn't give them food and shelter. When I gave them the consciousness and they started to use it, they made the changes in their life to have a better balance by working harder to get their food and shelter. Because change and balance teaches you're going to have to change something in your life to go get the balance you seek. So there's no external giving where you can get it yourself. So it empowers them to actually get up and go get it themselves. So this guy who has his wife and daughter, he's delivering bread after working at a truck driving place. Gaza, bus park, wife, kids. And here comes Randy. And I'm among them. And I give him some wisdom. And then, brother, he came to the, after delivering bread in month, he says, yeah, man, Randy, you know it go. Change and balance, you know. So it's like, what do you mean? You're using it? No, they only truth, man. They're getting it. So when you can't read the Bible or the Quran to get right with God, we have to find a new way to get to them, right? A new truth that they could get right now. They're the right now generation. So what I'm talking about is not for the believers in their faith who are okay. You know, they say when the teacher comes, the teacher don't come for the ones who's okay. The teacher comes for those who are suffering and who are dunce, and they call them in Jamaica something dunce. So if me, the kid that lives in Bucktower Lane, and this kid is practicing change and balance in his life. And before he was a thief, 5 men that got shot. He was 4 men that got shot. He was 6 under the bed. So what I'm saying to you is I'm testing it. I'm building a camp of disciples of change and balance. We have 2 so far. One travels all the way from North Carolina. And he says, you know why I'm here, Randy? I says, why is that? He says, because of change and balance. I didn't trust anyone. But because of change and balance that I had to apply the change and the balance within me, I trust you. So now I'm going to baptize him tomorrow at Roaring River as the second disciple. So what I'm saying to you, like when I met the Rasta woman, Mr. Howell, the founder of Rastafari movement, and she gave me the blessings, and Marcus Garvey's son gave me the blessings. What I'm doing is creating a new doctrine. I'm writing a new doctrine that can be applied, a new God tool. And my apologies if initially I came across aggressive against religion and Islam, and they're all going to have to be revived. And that's a tone just for the wake up. I like to wake people up by poking the bear. You see, but it meant no disrespect to you, or I would never approach humanity with a conversation that strong. At the same time, I would poke some bears out there, because let me tell you something, my brother. You know, universal truth, earthly truth, and universal truth, 2 different things. When universal truth comes here, everything else is going to be challenged. You see, and I think what this formula is going to do, and my voice, and you see, and this is why I know we tread upon light waters, because of mankind and their emotions. And I've been kind of tippy-toeing for a long time, because I would never disrespect Islam or Christianity, because I know the word is what saves me. The word that they said Jesus said, I apply. And when I read the Quran, I will apply some of that too, word too. But I wanted something that applies to the butterfly because I'm more and apply to the trees because that's more truth for me. Because you see what I'm saying? So we're we're not in a disagreement. I think I'm in development of something, not in any rush to present it to people. This is why, but I'm a little bit perturbed at what's happening in the Middle East. And every time I hear people are dying, you know, there's an urgency for me to speak, not against anyone, but just to see the dysfunctionality of the consciousness, of the manuals not working, and the agree to disagree is my problem, you see. And that because mankind has that ability and that freedom, flexing that muscle, universally, that's not satisfying. Universally, harmony and the connection we all have together in the all is in full agreement. There is no disagreement in the universal system. And this is why the male ego and the male system has to be challenged on a universal principle. So you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Only thing I will add is that the it's not the text itself. You challenge the institution because it's the institution that has caused the misinterpretation. To your point, you did acknowledge that all of the books in its origin, original intent, do talk about the universal order of things, right? The butterfly is considered in the Quran, in the Bible, right, by the authors, right, who we believe are black men also. The institutions are the ones that have skewed the understanding of that. So the universal law is there. It's just that the institutions that have caused that, yeah, the institutions have caused the Middle East to descend, right? Because people have gotten together and in the institution. That's why Jesus went into the temple, right? Because it's the temple that has become a place of confusion and filth and things of that nature. So I'll just end that with an example. There was a very strong Christian woman here I was talking to, and she said, "Oh, I will pray for you." Right? Then we continue the conversation. Then we start talking about witchcraft, and she talks about how she feared witchcraft. Then I had to stop her there. I said, "Then don't pray for me, please, because if your God is not stronger than that witchcraft, then I don't need your prayers are useless." That made her think because I was challenging whoever was teaching her to fear witchcraft, but at the same time say God is great, then that institution has failed her because it hasn't taught her to overcome that fear of witchcraft. Because God is supposed to be omnipotent and is supposed to be stronger. If that makes sense, just to challenge the institution itself, because the institutions have failed.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for your time. This was good. I want to do this. This is good. This was healthy. Thanks so much. This is great. I love it. I love it. I love it. We need to have more of these discussions. And yeah, yeah, that makes sense because we can't rest. You know, we can't rest anymore because something has to, time is coming where we can't rest. And I uploaded 2 videos to the internet. They're 300,000 apiece. One on astrotheology and a 10-hour one on religion. Two of them got 600,000 views in 7 months after keeping them away from the public for 7 years, you know. And this is part of the mission: provide information for the, like you say, challenge the institution. And this is what these, as people get more information collectively, will all make things better. All right, my brother. Love it. Thank you for your
Take care.
time. Respect.